Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Toby Slater. I own and run Slater Conservation Limited. I don't really like talking about myself too much, but it might be an idea to give you a bit of background about me. I specialise in timber frame repair and also joinery of historic windows and doors. In 2021, I was a SPAB Fellow, and I was also the SPAB Millwright Fellow. My life before that has been quite varied. I was a shipwright for 10 years, and I used to sail for a living around the UK on traditional sailing wooden boats. It is impossible to be sure of anything but death and taxes. Now, Benjamin Franklin was a very knowledgeable man, but he wasn't a carpenter. So I've taken the liberty of updating it. And it's very true, and it undermines my repair ethos, really, that wood will always have a habit of moving despite all of the things that you try and do to stop it. So, as Joe mentioned, the most important thing to me as a carpenter is the longevity of a repair. Mainly from a commercial aspect, because you obviously don't want comebacks from repairs that you do, but also for other reasons, that if windows, especially windows and doors, if any repairs that you do then have problems and then leak, you can actually cause more damage to the building further along the line. So the things that you have to think about for longevity is either repair or replacement. Do you repair the section of timber or do you replace that completely? Can you replace just a component of a window? For example, of a sash window, you can repair just the bottom rail rather than the whole, rather than piecing in a small piece, and we'll look at that later. As Joe talked a lot about was timber selection and how important that is. The moisture content of the wood, as he mentioned, you really want the equilibrium of the new section of wood you're putting into the old section to be of a similar moisture content and below that of 20. You have to think about the timber sizes that you're actually repairing. So if you have small sections of timber, the smaller sections of timber are more likely to want to move. And so you have to think about that aspect of what you're actually repairing. The building aspect, whether it's north facing or south facing, because obviously they have different climatic changes and will affect the wood and the repair. Glazing, again, which is really important. Is your repair going to affect the glazing and important historic glass in the building, or can you move around that to facilitate a repair? And also the paint. We spoke about paint and how that can affect especially sash windows, which we'll talk about later. Secondly, you need to think about, obviously, the historic fabric of the window, sort of the age of the window, what's important, what can be saved. Again, secondly, and after that, you have to think about the building historic fabric. As I mentioned, poorly repaired windows can actually let in water, and you'll see examples of this later, and actually cause damage to the historic fabric. And what everyone keeps going on about, which is the most important thing as well, is maintenance schedule, is the repair. If you have windows in a sort of 3rd or 4th story building, the chances are, with the best will in the world, they're most likely not to be repaired as often as windows on the ground floor level because of the cost of scaffolding and access and things like that. So these are all things that you need to think about in order to make a decision on how you're going to repair a window. And every window will be different on a case-by-case basis. This is I have to say, I know I'm a SPAB Fellow, but this was more of reproduction and restoration than conservation. But it was guided on sort of sound knowledge. We had originally these were casement windows, but they were so badly rotten that they needed to be removed. And we had the evidence of exactly what the shape of the mullions were. We had the really original mortises, top and bottom, of where they went. So we knew that exactly these were what there was originally, and the owner wanted to replace them, and based on the evidence, the conservation officer agreed that we could do it. So this was a job that we did in Essex. Casement windows are slightly easier to repair than sashes because the timber sizes are generally bigger, and so you have more to repair onto. I'll show you the left-hand picture here. There's a line along here. That actually is a previous repair that someone had done. And the problem that they had done with that is that it was a flat top effectively. And then what happened is water, that movement of the timber over time had opened up a little bit and the water had got in and actually caused most of the decay to that sill below. So what we did here, we did a complete face replacement. There's still the original behind it, but this is just a complete face replacement here. And then that means that no water can get in, and actually that means it will last longer. You will notice obviously as well we have the squinted shoulders here. So again, if these joints do open up in time and the water does penetrate in, that will just run straight out of that joint and not sit there and cause any further decay. So as I mentioned, sloping shoulders are a key point. There's another example over here. And just to show you one here, you notice they're both sloping into the window and not into each other, because if they're both sloping into each other, then again, it'll be a moisture trap and can promote some decay. Where possible, I would try and do complete face repairs, as we saw in the previous slide. But you also have to think about fixings, that the tannic acid in oak will rot out steel fixings. And I cannot tell you how many times I've replaced fixings from work that has been done and they're non-existent. And actually over time, they will start to decay the oak themselves around them. So anything that's oak, certainly you should be using stainless steel fixings for any repairs. This drawing similar to this was shown earlier, just shows the details of how a sash window works. And the main things that we'll talk about is the bottom rail here. As Joe mentioned, quite often is the first to decay, and then the meeting rails generally are in good order, but we'll see an example of something that's gone wrong on a window later, and then the sills as well. This is a house in Essex that I was there for quite a period of time. The owner unfortunately had done 2 years worth of work already to this house and had previous people in. And then I was called in to do some timber frame repairs. So the back part of the house is actually a medieval timber frame house made of oak. And then the later back part, which you're looking at here, is a Georgian extension of an elm frame, which was about a 6x3 elm frame stud, which was then completely clad in brickwork and then also a cement render over the top, which is why we were called in, because most of the frame had actually decayed really badly because of the cement render and the brickwork that had been placed over the front. As I mentioned earlier, these are 3 separate windows along the back elevation there, and these were all caused because the sills had been really badly repaired. And obviously the water had got in the bottom and caused all this decay to the framework. We'll talk about an upper sash repair now. As Joe mentioned earlier, quite often this is an upper window, and the rail on the meeting rail had separated from people pulling the window down. And the glue had also failed on this, so we separated the window, saved most of the glass. Unfortunately, a few panes did get lost, broken trying to remove them. And then we repaired the window, re-glued it and reinstalled it. The lower sash repairs, as we mentioned, it's always generally the bottom rail that is decayed. You can see on the left-hand picture there's a small crack there, which most of the time would get filled with filler and then repainted over the top. The problem is the glue that was originally used had failed, and that means that no matter the filler that's put in and paint over time, it will constantly move and constantly crack. And that water, as you can see in the middle picture, has got into the mortise and tenon and started decaying it quite badly. And it's hard to see in the picture, but that's actually filler all the way on the bottom rail there that someone's tried to sort of repair it previously. So our solution again was to break the window apart into sections, re-glue all the joints and have a new bottom rail on there. And that way, with the modern glues, it will last for quite a long time now. So the key points to sort of go back over for sash repairs is that most prone to decay on the bottom rails. the build-up of historic paint all over the windows, which has been mentioned previously, they're painted shut. And the reason why this causes an issue is that the paint covers the joints, and then they become then a moisture trap, and then they start rotting out from behind the paint. These sash windows often suffer from historic glue failure, that they really should be broken apart and re-glued back together, because if they're not, the filler will always crack and water will get in. Again, like with the casement, sloping shoulders to try to prevent moisture traps. And I again would try and say repair complete sections rather than piecing in, like we did here with the new bottom rail. This is a cross-section of the sill from the house that I showed you. You can see how bad of a repair that actually was. So they didn't take all of the rot out. You can still see pockets here of all the decay. They pieced on a new section of oak with the sapwood here still showing, which will quite often just rot out instantly. You should try and avoid using sapwood in oak where possible for repairs. And this joint here was not well fitted in any way, shape or form, and filled out with repair care, which also runs all the way up here. So unfortunately, this particular sill didn't stand a chance. Sash window box repairs are slightly more tricky to repair. The reason being that they're very thin in nature, and quite often trying to stop the movement in the timber is quite hard because you're dealing with quite thin pieces of timber. They can be repaired, and as you can see in this picture here, they've again got sloping shoulders. Shutters and window boxes. This is the internal of the house that I showed you. Shutters are notoriously a pain in the backside to repair, and I'll explain why. Unfortunately, a carpenter again had a go at trying to repair them and did another bad job. You can see here, this is the framework to the side of the shutters. These should extend all the way down to the ground, but they were cut off and bits put in, and it was always going to move and crack. And so we put new sides on. Broke all the panels down again because you can see all the glue joints had failed here. So these were all broken down, re-glued back together, primed, and you can see an example of it back in position here. Here you can see a lower panel. Again, the broken bottom panel, which is here, that's had a new section glued on. And also this is a split in one of the rails, which was glued and put back. And this is the framework showing of a new frame, because this was missing in the room of one of the vertical sliding shutters. As I mentioned, window shutters are a pain in the backside to repair, and the reason being is that you have to get all of the joints here fitting really well, and also the joints across here in the closed position. But then they fold back on themselves, and then you have to have equal joints along here and obviously vertically. So it can be done, but they take a lot of jiggery-pokery to get them right. And here we have the window box back all in the sides, and we're just dry fitting the edges of the frame just to make sure everything fits really well. And these are the finished items. This is one that's been decorated. This is one in the upstairs room, and this is the room here. And so this is just a short video just to see them all in action and moving, and you can see them how they work. These vertical shutters are not very common, and there are not very many examples of actually complete working ones around.
Thank you very much.